Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor, and thank you very much for joining us in, well, it's fair to say, in uncertain times. This show is one of our legal specials, and we're going to be talking about the major news that broke over the weekend of a second national lockdown that's planned from this Thursday, and it's set to last for 1 month. But what does this mean to the motor trade? Is the motor trade prepared? And can dealers operate during the next 4 weeks in the most profitable way possible? Joining me is the man who had very little sleep over the weekend as he covered all of the news. It's car dealer founder James Baggott. And to give the answers to the questions that you've been asking all morning, our Car Dealer Live regulars, Nona and Kiril from Motor Trade Legal Specialists, Lawgistics. Hello all.
Good afternoon, Batch.
Hello. It's lovely to have 4 people on the call. It's nice and chatty and sociable. I love it. Now, before I move to you, Nona and Kiril, James, I think it's worth us having a quick chat actually about what happened over the weekend and how the announcements affect the motor trade. I mean, as Car Dealer was probably the only motor trade publication reporting upon it live. You are the perfect man, I'm afraid. So let's start with the fact that I think it's fair to say most car dealers left work on Friday night expecting this week to be pretty normal. And then bam, they've got all this news to digest in a very short space of time, really, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely, Batch. I mean, as we know, I mean, we were sort of covering this last week, weren't we? There was a whiff of a second lockdown coming, and when we did that Car Gurus panel with Dash Gupta, Claire Martin, and Alex Jones from Carbase, they were starting to talk about how they were preparing their businesses for a second lockdown. And then, lo and behold, what happened Saturday morning? Papers get briefed that there's one coming. Government has to move pretty quickly and make its announcement later that evening. I mean, as you said, you know, I've been working pretty hard this weekend trying to make sense of what's been going on. What is clear is that car dealers are going to have to close from Thursday, as they did in March. Excuse me. They are going to be able to operate, though, in a click and collect style. Nona and Kiril, I'm sure, will be able to confirm this in a moment for us. But from what we understand, they will be able to operate click and collect. But those sales will have to happen online before those customers get into that dealership. They can't operate an appointment-only basis where these customers come in because they are effectively open that way. Yeah. It needs to be a full distance sale completed online, and then those customers can go to a sanitized area of that dealership, probably outside, do the handover of that car and continue in that way. And they will also be able to do home deliveries. Now, as we know, that is very difficult for a lot of dealers to do, especially on a scale. You know, when you're talking a big dealer group, the sorts of cars that these people need to deliver, near enough impossible to do. So that is difficult. So click and collect is absolutely crucial. So yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the picture is back. Yes, we are back into lockdown, but as the dealers I've been talking to, they feel better prepared this time round. Yes, it is a massive blow, but we sort of know how to do this, don't we? And we managed to make it work before.
Yeah. And I mean, like you say, we were sort of, there were the rumours of a second lockdown last week, so we were covering this before the weekend anyway. And one particular story we were covering is the fact that dealers are ready. I mean, the big dealer groups, they've had plans in place. They've known which showrooms which dealerships they're going to keep open to continue servicing and all those kinds of things. So, you know, the savvy dealers have been prepared for this, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely, they have. And from what I'm hearing this time round, the dealer group bosses I'm talking to, and a lot of dealers are going to keep their servicing departments open. There is still a huge amount of MOT work out there. I mean, there was an MOT extension earlier this year, as we know, gave 6 months to those people with an MOT then. That's been extended to this period, and they're already working through this huge backlog. So they are busy, these service departments. So people out there that are worried about getting an MOT done, worried about service and repairs, they shouldn't worry. From what I'm hearing, those dealers are going to continue to open those, and hopefully that will continue. And then on that MOT extension front, another thing that's been driving a huge amount of traffic to our website is we don't think a second MOT extension is coming. From the people I'm talking to, the IGA and others, they don't think they can do that again. It's hopefully only for a month, probably going to be extended from what we're hearing from ministers at the moment. But that MOT extension probably is not going to happen again. But you know, the message to get out there to people is that service and repair world is still going to be operating.
Yeah. Is the main reason why there isn't going to be an extension simply because there's a huge backlog? There's already a backlog to get through, and by delaying it by another 4 weeks, the potential to have dangerous cars on the road just grows enormously.
And although it was a pretty good thing when this first unprecedented kind of lockdown happened before, I don't think it was incredibly popular, that MOT extension with a lot of people. Yes, it helped out people, but still it meant there was a lot of cars driving around that had potentially seriously lethal faults. So I don't think that's coming back. But then who knows? This may go on longer than 4 weeks. And if it does, then the hand of the government and the Department for Transport might be forced.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point there. Who knows? That is something that Nona and Kiril definitely feel about. You know, nobody really knows in all of this. So we're trying to make sense of it the best way we possibly can. Before I turn to Nona and Kiril, can we just talk about auctions as well? Now, physical auctions, as we know, have been closed for the majority of the year. Only some of them have reopened, some have remained closed. What are the auction companies saying?
So I've had a couple of updates on this literally within the last 10 minutes. One that's come through from Mannheim says they are going to continue with their online auction program as it is. Buyers will still be able to collect their vehicles by appointment only, and they're going to continue to collect and deliver vehicles in a safe and appropriate manner for customers requiring that service. So that's quite big news, because there's been a lot of questions about this. This will be the next story that I write when we finish this conversation, Batch, is about auctions. There'll be a lot of people wanting to know whether that's going to continue. If Mannheim are doing it, BCA are very likely to do it. I spoke to them this morning. They were having a meeting this morning. I'm hoping to get an update from them soon, but I'm pretty sure it will be similar. That they have worked very hard to get their businesses set up in a COVID secure manner. And if they can continue in this way, they will do. NAMA has also put out an update to dealers. That's the National Association of Motor Auctions. They have told their dealers, told their auctions that they will have to close to the public, but they will be allowed to continue to do that online. So that has just come out this morning to their members. Something else that we're going to be covering shortly. But as we stand, looks like online auctions will continue, delivery and collection will be allowed to continue too.
Fantastic. Okay, well, like you say, we will cover that as soon as we possibly can. Lastly, James, I mean, what would be your advice to dealers watching this?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, we are back in a similar situation as we were during the first lockdown. That came as a massive shock to this industry, as we well know. We're a very resilient bunch. The automotive industry is incredibly resilient, and dealers especially so. They've worked out a way to, and as we put out on the website, play by the rules. There are ways they can do it, and I'm sure Nona and Kiril will be able to tell us that in detail in a moment, but there are ways they can do it. Click and collect is the way forward. Try not to push the envelope too much and fall foul of it, because it won't look good PR-wise, but there is a way to continue trading. Make sure the after-sales departments are still open and generating money, and we'll be through this, you know, before we know it, and hopefully back to more pent-up demand in the new year.
Yeah, and I do feel as though those words, pent-up demand, may make their reappearance again at the early part of next year. So thanks for that, James. Fantastic, great update. Right, we've had questions pouring in this morning. This is a live show, so if you're watching and you're worried about your business, then post your questions in the comments box, and we'll do our best to ask them or answer them in the next half an hour or so, however long we want to talk. So, right, Nona, can I turn to you, please? And I'm sure, like every other dealer watching this, you left the office on Friday night expecting a very relaxing weekend and a perfectly normal week this week. Did all of this come as a surprise to you?
Yeah, it did really, because Boris had his tier system set up, and I think we were all going along with that. And then like everybody else, Saturday morning the rumours came around with the newspapers, and then obviously Boris was forced to come out at 5 and about 7 o'clock in the end, eating into my Strictly time. Not very good. So there. So we were on the phone back and forth, myself, Kiril and Joel, working out what this means for dealers and starting work on what we need to be telling people from today.
Yeah, it was a bizarre clash of worlds on Saturday night, because I was in the middle of a Halloween party, and then we had to stop and put BBC News on, which was it brought the mood down somewhat, I have to say. But Kiril, you and I were talking at great length last week. You know, we were talking about all sorts of things, you know, new guidance, and then all of a sudden, bam, it feels like all of the conversations you and I had were, in an instance, completely and utterly disregarded. That has been the subject, that's been the feel of all of this throughout the past few months, isn't it? What goes 1 minute changes the next.
Yeah, I'm afraid it certainly has been the way. It's not really helpful for any forward planning. So yes, well, I was quite confident that because of the low risk of transmission that car dealerships would pose, they will probably be lucky to escape going into lockdown. Well, unfortunately, I was proven wrong. Again, the government chose to do universal national lockdown for England and Wales instead of more granular approach. Whether there will be sufficient benefit in it, well, remains to be seen. But what we know for now for sure is that the furlough scheme has been modified, the level of support has been increased, and most dealerships, whilst we're still awaiting the detailed regulations, which we expect them to be out on Thursday, it's quite likely that the click and collect, click and delivery will be continuing the same way it was going on in March, and quite a few dealerships were able to utilize the opportunity back in March, though, so to say, that they able to adapt quite quickly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know we're all trying to make head and tail of this, aren't we? James, now we're getting some questions coming in. Do you want to sort of kick us off?
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on it. We've got lots of questions here, and we're not just, you know, for those people watching, we're not going to set a time limit for this. We're going to try and get through as many of them as we possibly can. First, a few people are asking about furlough, and we will come on to that one. But firstly, can we just talk a little bit, Nona and Kiril, about how these dealers can stay open? So a couple of questions which I'll summarise is, how are they going to operate a click and collect system? Do they need to use an email system as a confirmation? Does it have to be done outside, or can they do it inside? And a few more, but I'll let you answer those two first.
Okay, well, the guidance as is, and I say there is more detail to come out. Obviously, they've got to have the vote on Wednesday, and there will be new legislation where the detail will be. But the guidance at the moment says vehicle showrooms have got to close. So the physical showroom, we are taking that to close. So dealers can operate. The guidance is also very clear that it says non-essential retail can stay open for delivery to customers and click and collect. So sort of in March, we were having discussions. I think myself and Kiril thought we could get around the law, but not everybody was comfortable with click and collect at dealerships last time, even though our interpretation was it's fine. This time, the guidelines on the website are very clear. They can do that. So that's not an issue. It's a question of how they do that now. We've obviously had a lot of inquiries here this morning already about whether that works as a distance sale or not. How can they do that without it becoming a distance sale? Now, of course, with a distance sale, you have to give the person 2 weeks to change their mind, which a lot of these online car businesses are doing now. Well, they should be doing, giving 2 weeks notice, 2 weeks right to change their mind if they don't like the vehicle. Obviously, that's not great, really, from a dealer point of view. So I think we can get around that. So if people are taking calls, they can take calls, they can take the orders online, however they want to do it. So if a customer rings up, they've seen a car on the website, and they want to make an appointment to come down and collect that car, and they make a deposit to secure it, what dealers can do is call that a holding deposit that's refundable. And then when the customer actually comes to pick the car up, if they refund that holding deposit and then take the whole amount for the car on the day after the customer has seen the car, then that's not likely to be a distance sale, because the customer has concluded the deal after he or she has seen the car from there. But if it's click and deliver, you're doing everything over the phone or email, whichever way it's worked, and you're delivering it, that absolutely will be a distance sale, which means you've got to give the right paperwork with that.
No, there are so many different kind of iterations to this, isn't there? That there are ways that dealers can fall foul of it. What would be your advice to dealers out there that aren't doing it at the moment? How would you suggest the safest possible way is to facilitate a sale under these new lockdown regulations? You know, be that click and deliver, click and collect. What would you be doing if you were running a dealership?
Well, they've got to decide whether they're happy with the distance sale regulations. Are they happy to give that customer 2 weeks to change their mind? That doesn't mean that customer gets a full refund if he's driven it off for a couple of thousand miles in those 2 weeks, because you can make deductions for usage, etc. But you have to put that all in the paperwork. So if you decide you want to do distance sales and you're happy to give customers 2 weeks to change your mind, you must give them the right kind of paperwork. And we've got templates for that our members got access to. I think it's going on our website as well. Because if you don't give that paperwork, that customer can then bring that car back up to a year and 2 weeks later, which obviously is not good for the business if you're giving customers the chance to do that. The only way to get round the distance sale is, as I say, to take the holding deposit and get them to come and pick it up at your dealership. That's the only possible way to get around that, because the law says the distance sale kicks in when the contract is concluded, and technically, once you've paid a deposit, you're into that contract and you can't back out without losing your deposit. So if you're taking deposits over the phone, on the internet, however you're doing it, unless you treat it as a holding deposit and refund it, that is going to make it a distance sale. So click and delivery will always be a distance sale, because you definitely do not want to be taking the money at the person's house, because that then becomes an off-premises sale, and that's a different thing altogether. So if it's click and deliver, it will be distance sale. You need to give them the paperwork. If it's click and collect, it can be either, depending on whether you go on the holding deposit model or just use that as a deposit towards the car.
Sorry, Bats. I'm just going to move on here, if you don't mind, to a couple of questions that we've had quite a few in around body shops and MOTs and workshops, etc. So I'm not sure who'd be best for this, Nona or Kiril, but we've got a few questions on this front. Firstly, Ian Redding says, is a body shop still able to open alongside service and MOT workshops? And there's a question here from John Smythe, who said, can after sales operated in a showroom, as most service receptions are, still be allowed? You know, because if you walk into a big franchise dealer, their service receptions normally at the back of the showroom, isn't it? So how does that work? I mean, are they allowed to do it? So two questions there. I mean, perhaps you could tackle them, please.
So I'm going to drop in it. Well, I say the guidance at the moment says vehicle showrooms have to be closed. But how do you interpret that? And law is all about interpretation. So I would interpret vehicle showrooms as a place where people can come and look at cars, because that's the point of the showroom. So I don't personally see a problem with the service reception staying open, particularly because service and repair and all that kind of work can stay open. But again, that will be, we might see a bit more in the legislation as it comes out. But my interpretation of vehicle showrooms is you can't have people turning up to your showroom to wander around and look at cars. That's what they want closed, to stop the people and the possible transmission. But if service and repair are able to open, and your service and repair reception happens to be in the showroom, I don't see why that will be a problem. That might change when the legislation comes out later in the week, but that's how I interpret it at the moment.
We did have that before, didn't we, Nona? Because I remember this coming up on a previous one during the first lockdown. We had people who would end up going into a showroom for the servicing reason and end up wandering around the showroom looking at the cars in there. And our advice to them then was to say, look, you're going to have to stop that person doing that. That person is there purely for a service or repair to their car, and they can't look around the car. So surely it's got to be up to the dealers to carefully manage this in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if, the police, whoever comes along, they say, no, nobody is looking at cars. Our showroom model is closed. but our reception just happens to be in here, and we are allowed to stay open for service and repair work. So these people are just coming in. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, the dealer's got to make sure people aren't sort of sneaking in. Oh yeah, I like the look of that car. You know, that's not going to work, and you are going to be pushing the boundaries a little bit there.
Sorry, Batchelor.
Nona, can I just on that point? Do you think it's fair to say that this time round, dealers are going to have to be really very strict on customers on their premises? Because I know I'm generalising here, but as we've seen during the summer with relaxation of regulation, everyone's got used to this now. And so there could be an element of people feeling very comfortable and forgetting the rules that they've got to stick to whilst being on a dealer's premises. So really, have dealers got to be very strict about customers on their premises and making sure they stick to the rules?
Yeah, I think they have. And this example, obviously everybody's got to come in with a mask. You want all the hand. I think all the dealers, I haven't heard any dealers that haven't done their COVID risk assessments and haven't got all these things in place. But I think, yes, particularly if we're sort of pushing the rules a tiny bit, you want to do that within a parameter that's okay. So yes, they've got to be really strict about what they're allowing to make sure they stay on the right side of any line that we might be almost crossing.
And Nona, on that point, there's a couple of questions that come in on this holding deposit front. I mean, that surely that does leave a few questions, because if you're offering a holding deposit, people are going to think that they can then just come in and view that car, just have a look round it and kick the tyres. But it's not that, is it? They've agreed to buy that car, and you are simply facilitating the end part of that sale. What about dealers who might think, well, offering a holding deposit will just mean that these people can come in and have a look round?
Well, this is what I mean when dealers have to decide whether they're happy offering the distance sale option from there, because that really is the only way around it. And that might mean someone doesn't come in. That might mean they don't buy the car. So dealers have got to work out where they sit. Do they want to guarantee the deal and take a deposit and therefore have to give them the distance sales paperwork to stay safe? Or do they not want to give them the 2 weeks to change their mind and therefore go with a holding deposit and take the risk that the customer might not turn up or get there and they might want to walk away from the deal? That's where the choice has got to be made.
And where does that leave test drives? So I mean, surely this means that you can't let a customer take a test drive.
Well, it's interesting because the driving instructors, of course, aren't working, and we've been going along with similar guides to driving instructors. However, I did see something earlier. I can't find where it says now. I was looking on the NHS site about what is a contact on their test track and trace. And that says a contact is a person who travels in a small vehicle with someone who tested positive. So there's nothing that says test drives cannot go ahead, or accompanied test drives anyway. There's nothing to say they can't go ahead. And actually, the test track and trace system allows for a contact of being a person sitting in a car. So again, at the moment, we don't see anything that says you can't do accompanied test drives now, as long as you've got the mitigation, wipe down your steering wheel, wear a mask, have the window open if possible, and preferably keep it sort of a shorter journey if you can. But yeah, there's nothing to say they can't do accompanied test drives, and I think it's accounted for in the test track and trace definition of a contact.
Can I just move the conversation on to essential travel now? We're talking about how dealers can operate, but of course, a lot of this is reliant upon how customers can actually make their way to the showroom. So what are the rules in terms of customers making their way to a showroom? Because, some would say that's not essential travel, is it?
Yeah, but I think on the government website where it says non-essential retail can stay open for delivery to customers and click and collect, that's pretty much carte blanche for customers to go and engage in that click and collect, because obviously if they can't go, they can't collect. So that's how we're interpreting that. So whether it's essential or not, I don't think is the issue, but the guidance. I think we've got to remember this lockdown is slightly lighter than what we experienced in March. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of lobbying going on by people from there. So I don't think it's as strict as last time. So I don't think we've got that essential travel argument, because we've been told that non-essential retail can do click and collect.
Yeah.
One of the other points that have been quite cleverly made here by a couple of people watching is what about outside forecourts? You know, if you've got some of these smaller dealers, they don't necessarily have a big showroom. They're set up on a pitch. What's to stop them just stood there like a market trader hawking their cars? It's not a car showroom, is it, at the end of the day?
No, and this is where the devil is in the detail again, you know, because it says vehicle showrooms, but then it says, you know, non-essential retail has to close. So is a car forecourt non-essential retail? Possibly, probably. Don't know. Will we get more definition on that later in the week? Hopefully we will. But yeah, we had these discussions last time, and I think a lot of our dealers with forecourts did stay open, and nobody was pulled up on it. We didn't hear of any fines. And I think the car showroom is about the indoor environment, which I think is generally thought to be more dangerous than the outdoor environment. But I think we probably need to wait until the legislation is written later in the week to check on that. But it's certainly something that's potentially open.
I mean, it's potentially likely that even by the end of the week, we still don't know about any of this. The guidance won't have been tightened up to actually cover lots of these important points which we're raising here. I suppose the answer to all of this is just try and work in the best way you possibly can. Be sensible, and don't push the envelope too much, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. With law, there's always, I say, a different interpretation from there. This showroom, what is a showroom, etc. There's all those sort of things going on. Yeah, but you're absolutely right from there. I say the only thing they've got to worry about, if they go down the distance sale route, they must give out that paperwork that they need, but they can get that. I think Joel's putting it on our website later if people want to get a free on one of the legal updates I think we're doing. But yeah, they've got to be on it.
Yeah. Right. I think hopefully we've covered everybody's questions about the mechanics of actually opening and operating under these times. I think we need to move on to furlough because, again, that was an enormous thing that broke over the weekend. I mean, at the end of last week, me and Kiril were talking about this new job support scheme as well. And now furlough has been extended. Kiril, can I just turn to you and just kick off with the furlough scheme being extended, does that mean that the JSS or the job support scheme is now null and void? Where do we actually sit at the moment?
It's not null and void, but it's actually been pushed back until this now extended coronavirus job support scheme, CRJS, as known as furlough, finishes. Currently, projected until 28th of November but we'll see. There is still some voices raised that can be extended even further than this. It's rather interesting because, as you mentioned, things are changing very quickly. Even this weekend, on the government website, there was an update to say that this current scheme now has been closed. Please make your plans by the end of November. And lo and behold, now we know, well, no, it's actually the opposite way. The current scheme has been resurrected, and the project scheme, the job support scheme, has been now pushed back until this one ends.
So is the furlough scheme now, is it the same as it was when it first came into practice in March, April time? Have we gone back to square one?
No, not entirely, because it's more akin to the flexible furlough. The only difference is, and it's a major difference one, is the level of support, because the businesses won't be required to contribute anything but pension and national insurance contributions. At the same time, the government will pay up to 80% of the normal salary up to the cap of 2,500 per month. So I think it will be more useful to think of the current scheme as reincarnation of the flexible furlough, because the workers, the employees, still can do some work and work some hours for which they're going to be paid in the normal way, and then can be put on furlough for the remainder of their hours. There is still this possibility. Another thing is that, it's a difference point really, that you don't have to be put on furlough back in March or in August or any time previously to claim under this new scheme. It could be a completely new employee. The main thing is that they must be on PAYE by 30th of September 2020, which means a real-time submission should be made at some point up to that deadline. So I think it's quite generous. We don't know the exact details what's going to happen to those who were on the PAYE but then were sacked and rehired or job restarted some other way. I suspect there may be a possibility that the employers will be allowed to claim for the rehired employees as well. But yes, so it's flexible furlough with a high level of support and no requirement to be previously on furlough to claim under it.
Kiril, I've got a couple of questions on this that have been sent in to us in advance, and a couple that have come in live. But just in summary, from what I understand it, workers will receive 80% of their normal pay up to £2,500 funded by the government. But this time round, employers will be required to pay the national insurance and pension contributions. So it's basically the same scheme as it was in August. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Then there is flexibility this time round, meaning that employers can continue to ask employees to work some of their hours and be furloughed for the rest like they did before. But the important point, and this sort of covers some of the things that have come in this morning, that all employees are eligible, as in they do not have to have been previously furloughed. So my question that has come in here from two people who have recently taken on staff, there is no limit. Is there on when those people have joined the business that they can be placed in this furlough? So I mean, if they joined yesterday, can they take up the furlough scheme for them?
Well, as soon as we know, as far as we know, rather, at this stage, I say it's subject to more regulations coming out later in the week. Yesterday probably will be too late because they have to be on PAYE by the 30th of October. So there is no other time limit. As long as they were on PAYE at some point up to that deadline, 23.59 or 30th of October, they should qualify to be claimed for.
So that's basically stopping a load of people taking on staff over the next couple of days and sticking them immediately on furlough. So yeah, I mean that one sorts of covers those questions. But the other ones that have come in live is how long that these people can be furloughed for. I mean, can they just furlough them for a day, 2 days, or do they have to be off for 3-week chunks as they were before?
From what we know now in the preliminary regulations, so say policy statement, really rather, it says 7 consecutive days. Whether it will apply just to an employee being able to make a claim once every 7 days, or that the employee will have to be on 7 consecutive days as a minimum, that remains to be seen.
I've got sorry, Batch, but I've got quite a few questions coming back in on the outside, inside showroom opening front. That
go for it.
I want to let the viewers know that we will come back to. I'm just wondering whether it might be worth turning to that now, Batch, if you don't mind, on the outside inside front, because several people have asked this question. When the click and collect happens, does it have to take place outside, or can they do it in the warmth of a showroom, Nona?
Well, to me, it would be totally impractical to have people definitely outside. If it's pouring down with rain, that's not a great experience for the customer, is it? I don't think. And again, I think, as I said before, the showrooms have got to be closed to stop people wandering, going out and touching cars and all those sort of things. I think if someone is coming down and your showroom is not open for a random person to come in, I don't think that's going to be an issue from there. I mean, particularly the weather could be horrendous in November. So I think it would be a bit mean if a policeman come along and said, well, why have you got your car showroom open? Or we're just doing a handover of a car. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But of course, you got the police are enforcing this. They will have different rules around different parts of the country. They will have their own interpretations how it goes on. But I think from the law, I don't think from a legal point of view, that's going to be an issue. That's not to say that it won't come up because someone interprets it slightly differently. But I think from a practical point of view, if the person's coming to pick their car up, it doesn't really matter whether they're indoors or outdoors to pick that up, I don't think.
Do you think they need to be able to prove that sale has, or the holding deposit has happened in advance and they're effectively doing the handover?
Yeah, absolutely. Then that way they can say, look, this person's picked their car up. They ordered it on the phone yesterday. They've come to pick it up. It's a horrible day outside. they've literally just come in to do this. I don't see that being a problem. It will be a problem, of course, if people kind of use that as an excuse to sort of justify getting people in the showroom to look at cars. I would say steer completely away from having random people turn up into showrooms.
Thank you.
Well, just before we go back to furlough, another question's just come in about outside, and this is obviously a key area where dealers are confused about Nona. So simply, how do people do an e-click on a finance application outside? I mean, I suppose it goes back to this point of, if it's pouring with rain, you're going to have to invite the customer inside, aren't you? I mean, you know, we can't sort of rigidly stick to the rules in these kinds of situations, can we?
No, I mean, if we're allowed to do click and collect, and that involves a finance product, you know, is that pushing the boundaries a little bit? Possibly, and these will be suck it and see situations, I think. But if the government has said click and collect is okay, and click and collect involves that happening, then I don't see that being a problem. But again, let's wait for the detail to come out. But that's just a practical solution, isn't it? I mean, what else can you do? You can't sit someone outside under an umbrella doing a finance agreement, can you? I mean, that's just ridiculous.
No, and especially when it comes to finance, you know, there are processes and practices that need to take place regardless of coronavirus. So, right. Let's go back to furlough. I feel as though we are going to be coming back to outside and the mechanics of handing cars over later on. But let's go back to furlough. So, Kiril, you've become our furlough correspondent, Kiril, I'm afraid. So let's talk about holiday. So I'm sure there are many dealers who are confused about when their employees can take holiday during the year. So with the new rules now, can people be asked to take any due holiday this year?
Well, the previous furlough system, at no point it said that it is not possible to take holidays whilst you're on furlough. And I think that will continue. So an employee can take holidays and be on furlough at the same time. And I think imprudent business would actually require staff to take some holiday if they are on furlough, because otherwise it was an issue before. We received quite a number of phone calls about this, and probably will be compounded by this lockdown, that staff just accumulates leave and it doesn't use it. So an employer can actually give notice to an employee and request to take holidays, providing they comply with the requirements, at least twice the length of notice as the holiday. So 2 weeks if there's 1 week of leave. But that's something for businesses to think about, and certainly request to take the leave if practical.
Okay, James, I think we are getting lots more questions about MOTs, aren't we? So and workshops. I'm
just quite conscious that I asked 2 questions earlier, which was probably pretty poor form from me, and we answered one of them, but we didn't do the first. It was the question about the body shops. Are they allowed to stay open alongside service and MOT workshops? Is it all treated as the same thing, Nona?
That's an interesting point, because I think it specifically says service and repair. But body shop is repair, isn't it? So I would say yes.
I'd like to think yes. I mean, I think, you know, if you'd ask my opinion on that, I would certainly say yes. It's definitely repair work, isn't it? A body shop.
Yeah.
And then the other question that keeps coming up is about the buying and collecting stock during the lockdown period. Batch. I mean, that is one that we covered at the start of this show when it came to the auctions. Just as a recap for Berlin Caravans there. Yes, we think that auctions will be continuing. From what we understand, Mannheim has said that they will be continuing their online auctions as normal. Click and collect will be happening, and they will be delivering vehicles and collecting vehicles in a COVID-safe manner. And we're pretty sure that the other auction houses will follow suit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a really important point, really. It's essentially business as usual, really, isn't it? Or business that we've become, you know, accustomed to over the past few months, really. So, and like we said earlier on, we will be covering about auctions and how you can acquire stock later. Well, as soon as this broadcast is over, we're going to be covering it in depth on the website.
I think that's just before we go, it might best be worth covering that one, because I had a phone call about this morning, and there's a question there from Reed Autos. What about car valeting? You know, are valeters allowed to continue working? What part of service and repair is that? I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose it sort of could be argued that it is a service, part of the service department. What's your thoughts, Nona?
Well, if valeters are valeting cars to prepare them for sale, I think that's part of the process, and that should be fine as well. I don't see a problem with that, and I think valeters were going in the last lockdown without issue.
Cool, thank you for that.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we've been live on air for precisely 41 minutes. And we've tried to get through as many questions as we possibly can. Do feel free to keep sending your questions in on email. We'll try and cover those in any stories that we cover. And we're in constant contact, unfortunately for Nona and Kiril, we're in constant contact with them. So anything we're not sure about or you're not sure about, we will try and get answers for. But unfortunately, we are going to have to bring this show to an end. Nona, Kiril, thank you so much for joining us. It's fantastic you trying to help us make sense of all of this. So thank you very much for coming on.
Always a pleasure, James.
Fantastic. Okay, right. Like we said, we've tried to cover as much as we possibly can. Thank you very much for sending in your questions, and do keep an eye out on cardealermagazine.co.uk, where we are covering these issues in depth, not quite 24 hours a day, but as frequently as we possibly can. So from all of us here at Car Dealer, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.